Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 4th season, we're looking at Kenneth Branagh's 2011 film, Thor. I'm Matthew Fox from theethicalpanda.com.
And I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And today we're talking about minute 56, which begins with a shot of the crater complex, also known as the hamster wheel, and ends with Thor kicking butt. Joining us on the show today and every day this week, we have Andrew Darowski, host of the Disney Animation Minute Essentials, and Joe Darowski, host of the Protagonist Podcast. And gentlemen, I can't get my sister to even listen to a podcast. Tell me about both of you getting into podcasting. How did this all happen?
Well, when we were going to start the Protagonist Podcast, I had a friend reach out who said, I've been getting really into podcasts and I want to start one. And I said, I've kind of been thinking the same thing. And we batted around some ideas. And then we both kind of thought, at first, we could probably edit this ourselves. And then we thought, no, that's foolish. If we're going to be prepping the discussion for everything, we probably need someone else to jump on. And Andrew had been working, doing some stuff in radio. So we reached out and said, hey, are you on board with trying to start a podcast? And now, Andrew, how long have we been going? 6 years doing the Protagonist Podcast together?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Getting close to 7 years.
Yeah. Wow. So Andrew frequently is on the Protagonist Podcast with me and is and also does a lot of the behind the scenes work for us on the Protagonist Podcast. And then I can't remember how long it was after that you started your own podcast as well.
My wife and I, we started doing a Disney podcast, a Movies by Minutes for Disney animated movies. So that would have been a little while after my wife and I got married. So that should be 2017 for when that actually started.
Nice. Great. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing both of your perspectives as we dive into this minute in just one moment.
You know, we have a great group of people over in our Discord server. I know a lot of you might be going, Discord, what's that? It's another social platform like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, stuff like that. But it's a place that's specifically designed to have communities. We love Discord. We love what it allows us to do and the conversations it allows us to have. So check it out. We'd love to have you over there. We're growing our group of Marvel fans there and would love to have more conversations in there. Just head to truestory.fm/Marvel Movie Minute and click on the Discord link.
Welcome back. Let's just first dive right in. What did you most notice about this minute? What kind of leapt out at all of you?
Well, part of it is, so I rewatched the whole movie and it made me eager to watch for Dutch angles. And I was actually startled. I was like, this minute doesn't have any Dutch angles. So that was like, as we were rewatching it just now, I was like, oh, wait, everything's flat. Everything's even for this one.
That may be a first.
It definitely seems that way when we get into the fight scenes, because I know when we had the first fight in Tunsgard and then we had the stuff on Jotunheim, there weren't quite as many Dutch angles. So it feels like...
Yeah, so they don't do it as much for the action.
For the action scenes, yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's one of those things that once it got pointed out, it almost the reputation maybe outgrew the reality.
I don't know. There are a lot in here.
It's pretty significant. So my wife and I watched it together and she was the one who brought it up. She's like, why is it so slanted all the time? I was like, oh yeah, they do that a lot in this one. A lot. And sometimes it's the focus is pulled so far forward that it's hard to tell. But if you look behind the actors and look at the horizon, you're like, yeah, it is really slanted.
Right.
With this minute in particular, one thing that did stand out to me is that Natalie Portman has some comedic chops that I don't really think of her because I think of her as the dramatic actress, because that's what I think the majority of her roles have been. But she does a good little punchy comedic line delivery in this minute.
It's one of my favorite things in this minute. It makes me laugh so hard. Just the way that she delivers that line on the phone to Erik. It's hilarious, and probably why she ended up in stuff like Your Highness.
Yeah.
They said, hey, maybe she could do some more comedy.
And it's always good to see someone who's delivering comedy solo, right? She's not playing off anyone else. She's not responding to anyone else. It's a monologue. And she's got good pacing and good timing with everything. And it does hit as a little bit of humor
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's one of the best moments in this minute. We'll get to that in a second for sure. Well, and so let's kind of start. I might be dating myself here, but we start with kind of the shot of the crater complex that Andy has nicknamed the hamster wheel, which I think is an appropriate way to
hamster cage. I call it
hamster cage. Sorry, thank you.
Because of all the plastic tunnels.
Because of all the tunnels are right. Yeah.
Well, and the first thing I thought is we get this kind of moving up to see, it's these bright white tunnels against the darkness and the light. It kind of gave me like the complex that they're studying in E.T. Is that something you all could see there as well?
Yeah, definitely. With like the I don't know how to describe the tunnels, but they kind of like expand like a slinky. They kind of unfold.
Yeah.
And they can fold them more compact, and so you see like quickly it's like, okay, they've done that kind of tunnel. So yeah, I think E.T. is a good reference point for that.
That was definitely the visual reference that popped into my head as well. Was the E.T. look?
Yeah, I always think about the kid, or like when they take the van and drive off with that one of those tunnels hanging off the back of the van. There is something weird about this sort of thing that does feel very. I don't know. It's like a weird military thing, but it also feels very clinical, like they're sealing something off that's dangerous. And I think that's why it's interesting in a way. There's something interesting about it.
Yeah, it feels like containment in some way.
Yeah. All the like plastic containment that you see with like nuclear sites and everything. So it evokes like it simultaneously is evoking like contamination, radiation, and the unknown. And
I think one thing we'll talk about in some of the later minutes is that it's set up as though like this is the sterile place. Like here's where we're safe. And we see a couple of times over these next 5 minutes how easy it is to break through that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I guess, to that end, it's kind of like spaceships, right? Where, they say that it's such a thin, almost, paper sort of thing that's between you and space that could just so easily rip off. But it's enough protection to keep the germs out or whatever, the radiation. It's interesting. And we'll see that as we progress and move into it, we'll actually see that there is some attempt at kind of sealing things off, which is interesting because they certainly don't bother sealing off Mjølnir in the middle.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But so much of the rest of it is sealed off. So it's a very interesting thing that they have going on here. Because, even the people aren't, like, they're not in suits that would say we need to be protected from something. So it's interesting.
I have a sense of what's going on here, but I'm wondering, for those of you who know the comics more, is this like visual of like that hamster maze and the white tunnels? Is that something we see when S.H.I.E.L.D. goes to a site and like sets up base in a can kind of a thing?
It's not striking me that that's something that's commonly used as I think through.
Okay. I can picture it in some of the Ultimate comics, but nothing specific. Like I can imagine that being the visual that they would go for, because it does kind of have a early 2000s, we are containing, we're watching for contamination kind of vibe. But that's a vague association. I'm thinking like maybe Ultimate Fantastic Four, because they were doing interdimensional stuff. They might have done that sort of thing, but like I said, I can't think of a very specific example, and nothing associating to Thor in particular.
Because one thing that comes to my mind is that it may not be that like, S.H.I.E.L.D. might just have like a once, put the lab on the truck and like, enough times they need containment that this is what they have. Here it's like a little bit overkill, but it's what they have on the truck. So it's what they show up in New Mexico with. That's
what strikes me as this whole design, which is, I don't know, when I see it, my sense is that they went for something that looked like it was a quick setup. Because, we know that this was all put together in less than 12 hours from the time Coulson arrived at the site to when Jane and Thor arrive in the evening. And this whole thing is set up. It's all, half a day and probably even less time. And so my sense was that they had to come up with something that felt like it could be assembled very quickly. And yeah, whether it's for containment or not, I guess it's just the quickest tool they have.
Well, and I guess this is later on when we see like they definitely have like a mobile base of operations, which looks like it's pretty much the size of a shipping container, right? So It could be on the back of a large truck and just drives it in, and then they plug everything in. And so like the base of operations with all the technology and the computers and everything is disconnected from this sterilization setup.
Yeah. Right.
Now, as I'm like thinking through in the MCU, when we see this kind of like visual language being used again, the only thing that kind of strikes me is in WandaVision, which is again like a real quick set it up for containment because we don't quite know what's going on. I've only watched that series once, but it feels like some of the visuals are definitely evocative of some of what we see with this version of S.H.I.E.L.D. Setting up a barrier or a containment area.
I think it's definitely true. And so then we see that whatever high-tech stuff they have, clearly the security system is not very high-tech because we have, the camera points to the light goes right on Jane. She ducks and then just everything moves on. There's no motion sensors. There's no high-tech security gear. It's just, is the security guard looking the right way or not?
Some alarm went off.
Well, I mean, the alarm was off, but when when the searchlight, I think what Matthew's saying is when the searchlight goes past Jane, like nobody reacts that, oh, we see somebody ducking out there in the brush.
Oh, right.
Like she just ducks and nobody does anything. Which, I mean, that's such a searchlight trope, right? I mean, it's one of those things. The searchlight moves past people, they duck real quick, and we know they're safe.
Mm-hmm. So then we get to see Thor, and he looks in his element. He's having a lot of fun here, clearly. But I thought this was a very interesting scene because, when we've seen Thor go into battle before, like, he did not sneak around into Jotunheim. He walked in, holding his hammer, saying, hey, everybody, I'm here. Let's have a fight. And so I think it's kind of interesting that he's sneaking around so much in this. Is it just that he always has at least a little bit of a strategic sense, or do we think this is him having some awareness that, like, hospital orderlies have been winning fights against him? Like, maybe he shouldn't do his normal. Like, what's happening to make Thor be in such a different attitude in this fight? I think
you're right. He's just a little apprehensive because he's not sure what his capacity is in this environment. Like you said, with the hospital orderlies and everything, he's like, okay, I can't fight the way I normally fight, so I've got to do something a little bit different. And I mean, that only really lasts until he's in the light. So as long as he has darkness, he's going to take advantage of darkness in this case. I've got to say also, like, the two guards who just leave the entrance, that's the least effective thing to do. It's like, okay, there's a breach. Okay, let's go join the search and leave our posts. It's like, no, there's other people running around. You don't have to start running around too.
My sense was just it might have been more for efficiency. That his whole purpose here isn't to get in a fight. His purpose is to go get Mjølnir,
right.
And so the fight would just slow him down. Not that he's scared of the fight. Obviously, he kind of revels in it once the fight starts. But if he could get to Mjølnir before the fight, he'd be happier getting to Mjølnir before the fight.
Yeah, he wants to sneak in, fight out.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Once he has Mjølnir, there's no more hiding. Everyone can come to him and he'll have fun with them.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we get that great phone call with Jane and Erik. And Andy, you pointed out something that I didn't hear before, but once you pointed it out, I did hear it this time. We listened to the minute. What did you hear with the voicemail?
Well, so what I think is really interesting, and it's hard to tell because when Jane calls Erik to leave him this message, the signal's a little bit broken up, but I swear that Erik says, "You've reached Dr. Erik Selvig, not Selvig." And I have always said Selvig, but I swear he says that. And I played it back so many times to the point where I started thinking it wasn't even in English anymore. But I really think that's what it is. And I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Selvig.
You reached Selvig? Oh, we said it Selvig as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. I don't know anyone who's ever said Selvig.
I feel like Selvig is said clearly at some point, either in this movie or other movies. So I think there will be clarity somewhere.
It's entirely possible, yeah.
But is it by someone else or is it by him? That's, does Nick Fury say Selvig?
I think there's a clarifying statement of it later on. And so I'm going to chalk it up to the crackle.
Okay. That's possible.
In the damaged audio in this one. Because I've only ever heard it said Selvig.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear other people use Selvig, and he might even say Selvig himself. That being said, I some colleagues of mine wrote a number of different pieces about how, especially if you're from a foreign country, how much do you sort of fight to have people pronounce your name properly and like choosing your battles. And I think the idea of someone who like on his own voicemail is going to pronounce it properly, but when Americans are constantly getting it wrong is just like, fine, you call me Selvig. Mm-hmm. But who knows? Yeah, I mean, that could have just been the actor having a little bit of fun or like you said, just static.
Yeah, right.
So, and then we get the great Jane phone call. And from you all, just remind people, if you haven't seen it a bit, this is where she says, Don't worry, I'm fine. Just in case you don't hear from me in the next hour, just come by the crater site and try to find me, okay? Which raises its own questions, but then says, and again, it's very casual, no big deal. I did exactly what you told me not to. Sorry. And then we kind of move on with our lives. What does you love about this one?
It's a oneer, and she does it all in one take. So none of the comedy is being found in the editing or adjusting the timing. So all this is her timing, and it's really fantastic. And that last bit, the little coda of "I did exactly what you told me not to do." That's one of those lines of dialogue that is funny in and of itself, but is also revealing of a larger relationship. It's one of those iceberg lines where we're seeing a tip, and that tip is actually going to make us react and give us the comedy that we're looking for. But it actually does say something about her relationship with her advisor, right? And how this isn't as formal as a lot of academic relationships would be. Like there is a camaraderie or a friendship, and also a lot of familiarity that must exist between these characters.
Yeah.
Right. And with that familiarity, it she's indicating this should not surprise you a ton. I was impulsive and did not think this through. And so it reveals a pattern of impulsivity for her, which I think is born through what you've seen prior to this and later on in the film. It's okay, yeah, she is kind of impulsive.
All the time, yeah, all the time.
I think that's definitely true. And what I get there is it's one part the impulsiveness and the sense, and it's also just like you said, the relationship with her and Selvig. We talked in an earlier minute about how it's not really paternal because it's more like professional, but it's also like mentor-mentee, and that he has a sort of protectiveness about her. I can very easily hear 17-year-old Jane using this exact tone with her dad, oh, I'm gonna be late for dinner. I did exactly what you told me not to do. Sorry. It's that kind of attitude towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the end of that phone call, and now we are back to Thor being sneaky. Andy, kind of walk us through exactly what you see here.
Yeah, I spent way too much time on this stretch of 5 minutes mapping out exactly where Thor was and what he was doing. It was just like this rabbit hole I went down tracing all this. It was nuts. So I mean, he's next to this, it looks like a big generator, and I think he goes under the generator. We see him kind of under something hiding. Mm-hmm. And then as all these agents run by, he kind of goes past it and goes to, at the end of the hamster cage, there's like this gray box entrance thing. And that's where those two guards were standing before they ran off. And for some reason, we hear some walla, kind of, which is the audio of people speaking that's recorded later. We hear someone say, "Bravo Quadrant, move." So I was like, well, maybe they're part of Bravo Quadrant and they were supposed to move. But anyway, Thor goes past that, and then he goes back over to the fence,
right?
And then he'll end up hiding behind some stuff by the fence to look at the other entrance. So I'm not exactly sure what his plan is here, but he's largely trying to kind of move around this courtyard, trying to get to what is the open entrance. There is this big open entrance on the south end of the actual complex.
Yeah, so then we pull back from the hamster wheel for a sec, the hamster cage, and we see the lightning again, and we hear it, and we're getting again this kind of the worm's eye view, or as I called it, the Mjølnir's eye view. To me, this it's a great movie making of there's a sense of building tension here, you really get the sense that everyone's sneaking around, but something big is coming.
I like the camera angles that you're pointing out. I think it is well paced for creating that sense of tension. I think if, like Andy just said, you're trying to map exactly what Thor's actions are, it does start to break down a little bit in wait a second, what is the big picture here of what exactly is
once you're in those tubes.
Yeah, right.
And even there's one shot where Thor is running across a wide open area to get up to the steps, and he swipes he's pulling his hood up, but he misses. And nothing happens. Right. So his head just kind of waves above his head, and they capture that they must have liked his run in that particular take.
Well, and then later on, you also get the moment where his shirt gets almost pulled up over his head, and it's no, we're just going to keep it, and he has to shrug his shoulders to pull it back down. It works, right? It seems kind of authentic. I do also really I think it's right before he runs across the open space, there's some thunder, and he smiles, and he feels like things are going right. He's okay, I'm getting close to Mjølnir. The storm is coming. This is how it should be. I'm in my element.
What I love about that is like, because that's right after that moment that Matthew was just talking about, where we see Mjølnir, the lightning strikes. And what I love about the sound design here is that they include this interesting hum when we see, as soon as the lightning strikes, it starts this hum, and we're looking at Mjølnir, and the hum kind of slowly starts building. It starts low and kind of starts going up a little bit through that whole dolly shot as the scientists are looking at Mjølnir, all the way to when Thor sees it and looks up and smiles. And it's just like the way that all of that kind of connects and builds that energy. It's very exciting. I think they do a great job of kind of tying all that together with all these different tools here.
Well, especially because for me, part of what it gives the sense of is that it's not that Thor's creating this lightning and thunder. It's not that Mjølnir is creating it. But when the two of them get close to each other, like things start happening, you know? And I got the sense of he kind of recognizes, lightning and thunder's happening because God of Thunder's getting close to his thunder hammer. And it's interesting because more in the next couple minutes, but even here a bit, the original script wanted it to be much more specific, like that the hammer starts glowing and things like that as he gets close. And I really like this way. I like that it's subtle. I like that you have to sort of put the pieces together to realize that it's not that one of them's controlling everything. It's just that as they get close, sparks start to fly.
Well, and even with the sound design, I think one thing that actually works is there's some ambiguity as to what is diegetic and what's non-diegetic in the sound. Like the hum that you identify, is that part of the music score soundtrack, or is that part of what's coming out of Mjølnir at this moment? And the fact that it's ambiguous, I think, actually adds to how well it works in this particular moment.
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up a lot when we hear Mjølnir because it always has that great ringing sound with it. And I'm like, is everyone hearing that, or is that just something that's for us? Because I love it either way, but it is kind of fun to think about.
That ringing hum kind of becomes like, okay, this is the sound that Mjølnir makes. And it's not like when it turns on, but it's something to that effect, right? When it's becoming active.
Yeah, right.
Like there is some sort of thrumming, ringing noise,
like and the tone of a MacBook turning on.
Or like my computer when I plug it in, it gives a little like ba-doop. And so it's some sort of activation, powering on kind of thing, but it also does it like when it's in use. Like when Thor throws it, it starts to do that noise especially when it comes back to him, right? He like throws it and then it like reaches a pitch and then it comes back to him. It's like, okay, that's part of like the Mjølnir soundboard.
Which is very cool. I don't care if it's with actually people are hearing it or not. I just love hearing it. It's just such a great sound.
I think of it as people hearing it.
Yeah, I do too. But there are a few times where I'm like, maybe they're not hearing it, because there are a couple times in the film so far where I'm like, oh, maybe no one actually did hear that. Because we also hear it when the first townie puts his hands on it. I'm like, are they hearing this now?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if everybody hears it or if it's just a Thor thing, but
yeah, I think maybe sometimes it's not. But then like, as we get farther into the movies, like by Avengers, it's like, okay, I think this is the sound that the hammer makes. And I think people hear that sound, but maybe at this point, no.
Well, it gives you time to move your head out of the way so it doesn't take your head off.
Yeah, if you hear that sound, you move.
Yeah, that would be a good thought, or you're going to hear that sound a lot. Because when I think of like the hammer and ringing, like there's also a sense of like, you get hit with this, your head's going to be ringing for a while if you're even conscious. So then we find that we see him like run across the road and run into the complex.
And now it's raining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's raining, which makes his hair just look fantastic. And he missed the hoodie, but no one's complaining. And then we get this shot of like, it looks like someone in black, some sort of S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, sees him and follows him in.
Yeah.
That's what you get out of that, right?
I'm going to look at that one again.
Yeah, that's what I got out of it. We see a number of people. And we do hear some Walla, there's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and some of the stuff, I hear them doing it, and the only way I can actually translate what they're saying is by turning on the subtitles over on Disney Plus, because it's so muddled. It's just a bunch of sound, but somebody actually says, entering South Tunnel. So clearly someone spots him, and they all start moving on him toward the South Tunnel.
But see, here's the thing, and I watched again very carefully. That person's maybe 2 seconds behind him in terms of like running in. And then we see him like have this fight at the first like intersection for a good 10 seconds or so. And I keep waiting for someone to sneak up, to come up from behind him.
No, nobody does.
And they never do.
Right.
Is it just that person just kind of gets forgotten, or do they like watch their buddies getting their butts kicked and go,
they're all right.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
Maybe he's told to guard the entrance so he doesn't come back out.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. It was so weird that it's so clear that someone sees him, and then there's no significance to that. But what do you think of the fight itself that we get to see here?
I mean, I think it's good action. The fighting, I will say, it starts to feel a little bit generic in this sequence, where it's just a lot of bodies being thrown against each other for a little bit. I think everyone's doing a good job, like with the stunt. The stunt actors are doing a fine job. Like it feels like there's real weight to all the motions that are being done, and not sometimes you can feel the punches being pulled in some sequences. I'm definitely not having a problem with that. It's just in these 5 minutes, there's a lot of bodies being thrown against each other, and it does start to feel a little too familiar as far as what these action beats are going to be like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he kind of takes the first one down, like throws him over his shoulders, and then grabs the other one, and that's the guy who grabs him and essentially pulls the rain slicker off, accidentally as he's trying to grab Thor, and also pulls his shirt up for that brief second. So yeah, I mean, you're right. It does feel a little generic. Like nothing in this stands out as kind of an overly exciting fight. I guess I don't know. I feel like that these 5 minutes or maybe kind of 3.5 minutes, the first 3.5 minutes we're going to be talking about with this fight, it feels like it's building to that end fight that we have. And these are just kind of the lead up to it.
Yeah.
So they just feel
to the boss battle, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
These are the early video game minions that you've got to go through.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So they don't feel that exciting yet.
And what also struck me, though, and I think this is very intentional, you're right, it's kind of generic, and I wish, maybe it could mix it up a little bit. But mostly what I get is this feels like a hero, like a secret agent man, not like a super-powered being.
Mm-hmm.
This is still, people are knocking him down, he's knocking them down. He's clearly a better fighter. But this doesn't look like a god fighting men,
And also this is a brawler. Like he's just brawling in this. He's not summoning any powers. It's just how hard can I crash my body against your body?
Exactly.
Yeah, it is fully like body to body, which is definitely a contrast to the previous fight that he was in, where he doesn't put his body into anything. He's just using the hammer. And so I think a little bit of it is like, okay, he is still competent in fighting this way, but he's not as comfortable with it. Like he really is kind of just a brute with this, where it's like, well, I can lift this guy over my shoulder, so I'm going to lift this guy over my shoulder. Like I'm strong enough to do this, but he takes the hits too. Like I can take these hits, and so it's not a super finessed kind of fighting, right? He does not dodge punches. He leans into them.
It's an interesting point because I guess when you think back on it, like it generally has always been fighting with his hammer in hand. Rarely do we see him actually doing anything without. And so it is interesting to kind of see him in this place where he has to go old school, And
to me, it's that he has to go old school, but also I think it so underlines like Thor without his hammer. Thor, not just that he doesn't have the hammer for the fighting style, but he doesn't have his power. This is not the person who has the strength of 100 men and can knock a Jotun, like frost giant, 200 feet across a battlefield. This is a well-trained human being who is very good at fighting and can kick the ass of other people, but there's nothing in him that makes you go like, oh, wow, that's beyond human capability. It's like watching Schwarzenegger fight instead of watching a god fight. Which it was just kind of a fun reminder of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We do get a weird thing that happens in the script that, Andy, I know you picked up. In the script, he's supposed to have this moment where like someone drops an assault rifle and you see him pick it up. And there's supposed to be this moment of like, wait, is he going to shoot people? But then he takes the rifle and he throws it like a hammer. And he winds up like causing an ATV to crash. And I'd say there's sometimes where I read something in the script and I think that'd be great. I'm pretty happy I didn't have to see him like holding an assault rifle and throwing it. That just seems like it would not really help in any way.
It's an oddly scripted moment, the way, because it's like he looks at the gun like, what is this tool? Like he really has no idea what it is as he looks at it, very quizzically. And so, when this ATV driver spots him and shines his light on him, he turns the rifle around and then throws it like a hammer to knock out the lights, which causes this guy to crash. So it is a strange moment that's in the script. And interestingly, they must have shot it and then decided that it didn't play well, because we will actually see the crashed ATV, because what it does is it goes over the edge of the crater and crashes into one of the tunnels of the hamster cage, and tears a big hole in it. And so we'll actually,
and that's the hole behind Coulson later.
That's the hole behind Coulson later, and you can see the ATV on the ground below him.
Uh-huh.
And so and we'll see it again when we have Barton up in his little crate.
Yeah, I wonder if they thought, like, do we have to keep reminding the audience of his alienness, his lack of familiarity? And they probably decided, you know what, we don't need to go to that well too often. It's pretty well established that he's not of Earth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it seems like an odd moment to just have him looking at it so quizzically. And then, that would have ruined the joke in Ragnarok when Scourge comes back with his two guns.
Oh, so they're playing the long game and cutting it. They're like, you know what? I think
that's right. I'm sure
in 3 films we're gonna have a killer joke.
You're right about Ragnarok, but even just in a couple of minutes, we're going to see a moment where a character who we do not associate with guns reaches for a gun for half a second. So
right.
And in the script, it goes a very different direction. So
I think one of the other things is I like that it's not there, because it also makes Thor kind of dumb. In a way that it, like, especially in this movie, like, I think he's a little bit smarter in this movie than he is in the other movies. Like, he, at least interpersonally, like, he understands other people a lot better in this movie than he seems to in some of the other movies. And he understands, like, oh yeah, like, these worlds aren't the same. There's stuff that I don't understand, and I can get that. I'm still going to try and do my thing, and like, I'm going to push, why don't you guys understand me? But in later movies, like, he's kind of a dummy in a lot of cases. And so when you describe that scene, I was like, oh, that sounds like the way they would say, like, oh, let's have a joke about Thor being kind of stupid and not knowing how something works. Yeah. And so he does something in a dumb way.
Yeah.
Honestly, it sounds kind of like a Joss Whedon Thor joke.
I think that's fair.
Like when he steps on the Legos in Age of Ultron.
Oh God. Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what to do with this. And it's like, okay, Joss, like he's competent in, like, knowing that he made a mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all true. I think the one other thing that for me, I'm very happy, and I don't know if this was intentional by Branagh or just a nice side effect. One of my podcasts is called Superhero Ethics, and a topic I really am interested in is sort of when our hero is fighting against people who aren't evil, they're just kind of doing their job, but getting in the way of our protagonist. Like, what level of violence does he do against them? Because, if, like, the cops are generally doing a decent job, they think you are guilty of something. If our hero kills them, like, we're not going to look that great at them. And I kind of feel like there's an intentional, like, him picking up a gun, even if he doesn't fire it, or causing cars to crash. Like, now we're getting closer to, like, he could seriously injure or kill people. And I'm kind of glad also they stayed away from it, because it to me, it really feels like Thor is like, I will damage people enough to get them out of my way, but he's not coming in here to, like, punish S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. He doesn't want to kill them. He understands they're just doing their job. He just needs to get to his hammer.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, and it also immediately changes the stakes of, like, Coulson telling Hawkeye to hold off and kind of like saying, I want to see how this plays out. Once Thor's picked up a gun, I don't think you can do that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Because now it's like, I want to see if he kills any of my agents. Like, it's a much different kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is setting up so much. We're going to have so much to talk about over the next couple of days. But to both of you, Andrew and Joe, for our fans who are hearing you for the first time, they want to hear more of you, where can they find some of the stuff you're creating?
I would be at Disney Animation Minute Essentials, primarily, the podcast that I do with my wife for Disney animated movies 1 minute at a time.
How far are you right now?
We've only done 2, and we're going out of order. We're bouncing around so that we wouldn't spend too long in the 40s and 50s and everything. And so we're only about to do our 3rd film.
Which is, like, what have you done so far? I'm curious.
Oh, so we did Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs, and then Little Mermaid, and we're going to be doing 101 Dalmatians next.
Oh, great.
Okay. So if I want to hear your coverage of Under the Sea and Little Mermaid or Aladdin, I'll check back in, like, 2026, 2027, something like that.
I mean, all the Little Mermaid stuff's there, but for Aladdin, it's probably going to be at least another 5 years.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And Joe, what about yourself?
I host the Protagonist Podcast, and the premise of that is that each week we're going to talk about a great character in a great story, and we try and rotate between film and TV and novels and comic books, and also between kind of like the canon that everyone thinks is the great stuff, and also the more pop culture-y fun stuff. And so it's kind of eclectic what we talk about each week, but it's always going to be talking about something that we love and kind of celebrating the great stories that are out there.
Nice. Sounds awesome.
I saw that a recent one at the time of the recording was The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yes, that's one of our
awesome.
Our most recent ones. And it's we try and have fun whatever we're talking about. If we're talking about something fun, we're going to try and get some depth and get some insights. And if we're talking about something that's like canonically known as like one of the great things, we also try and have some fun and laughs while we're talking about it. So that hopefully there's always that mix of I never thought about it that way, and you get a few laughs along the way.
Well, I definitely have some questions, guys. I was recently in a discussion about Infinity War where I was making the case that I think Thanos is the protagonist of that movie from some points of view. So, all right, well, thank you to both of you, to our fans. As always, thank you so much. Please check out both their creations. Check out all the other great things happening on the next Real Family of Podcasts. Of course, check out my podcasts, Superhero Ethics and the Star Wars Universe Podcast. And most importantly, have a great day.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is One Last Ride by Martin Puringer. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.